This is my 1968 SS396 El Camino that I bought as a project a few months back. It's a car I've always wanted to have. Now I have one. Found it on Craigslist, found a pretty good deal on it. The guy that I got it from had started a restoration and had a couple other projects, and as it goes, he needed to get rid of this one so he could finish what else he had. And I guess the timing was right because this was what I'd been waiting for, and I got it, and so I figured I'd do some videos on the restoration of it. It's nearly numbers matching, as in the engine is the correct year and date and everything, but it doesn't actually match the VIN. The transmission, however, does. The rear end, everything else does. It's really clean, zero rust, California car. So that works actually really well for me because as much as I'd like to have it as original as possible, I still want to be able to drive it and not really hot rod it, but have a little bit of fun with it because it is a SS396, and what else are you going to do with it? So what we're going to start off with is the rear end. It's a 12-bolt posi rear end that's a little bit worn and it's got the wrong gear set in it for what I want to do. It's a 308, and I'm going to be changing the ratio. So I figured that now's a good time. So let's get started. Okay, so this is the actual rear end assembly itself. This is as I said, a 12-bolt Chevy, the heavy-duty one. You can tell by, of course, the bolt holes or amount of bolts that are holding the cover on. There's 12. There's always 2 at the bottom on a 12-bolt. All right, so I should actually go ahead and pull this out, and we'll see how it all comes apart. This is a C-clip axle, so what that means is the axles are actually retained within the rear end in a couple of C-clips in here. So I'll go ahead and pull those out, then we can pull the axles out, and then should be able to remove the third member from out of here. So there's a bolt that goes through here that retains a pin that keeps everything kind of held together. So we'll get that out. You want to be real careful with this pin. If you strip them out or break them off, you have a bad day trying to get them out of that rear end. So get it rotated down. There's, like I said, a pin that just drops out. You can see right there is where, when you bolt this in through that hole, this retaining bolt will hold it into the rear end. Or differential, however you want to say it. Now, inside here, the axles, you can reach in with your fingers. Usually, these are kind of tight. I might have to use they might be held up on the brakes. But anyways, I'll get those out. The next thing to do is the 4 retaining bolts here. Just take these out. There's 2 here and 2 more here. What you want to do when you take these caps off is you want to make sure that the cap stays, right side stays on the right side, left side stays on the left side, and you want them to go in the same direction. So I'll take them off and I'll set them down, excuse my knee, and I'll set them right down on the ground on that side, and then I'll take this one off and I'll do the same thing again, excuse the knee. I'll do the same thing right over onto the other side. So what I'm gonna have to do is mess with the brakes a little bit. I'll shut off the camera for that. Get the axles out. They're probably just hung up on the drums, the pads or whatever, no big deal. And then I'll pull this out. And then once I get this portion out, I'll take my caps and I'll put them right back where they came from on either side. So this will probably take me another day or so before I'm actually done, because I'll have to go get bearings and whatnot, like I said. All right, got a little bit ahead of myself here. Go back over this. What this does, this pin, it goes in there and it holds the axles back, holds the C-clips in. And you could add a screwdriver right here. Oh, well, the magnet will work fine. In here, you could see hopefully there's a C-clip in there. So what you do is you push the axle in, push it in, and it releases the C-clip out of its little space that it's in. Let me push it a little farther. And there's the C-clip. Now we can push the axle out, and it comes right out. And then I'll do the same thing to the other side. All right, so we got the carrier on the bench right now. This, again, like I said, this was a 308 gear ratio. We're gonna put in a 342, I believe is what it is. So it can use the same carrier itself. There's a couple of different series, Series 1 and Series 2, for in case you have an extreme. Like if you had a 270 rear, you couldn't really put a 411 in unless you had a gear that was specially manufactured for that series of case. And the reason for it is as your gear ratio changes, the thickness of this gear will also change. So in turn, if you have a larger, you know, the dimension on the actual carrier will be different for the different series. So anyways, it's not important at this point. One thing I do want to point out is, you know, I'm not a professional mechanic. I'm just a guy who's been working on cars for many, many years, mainly as hobbies and whatnot. Any of the tools and stuff I have is stuff that I've accumulated over many years of doing this. I don't work on other people's cars. I only work on my own and just my own projects. I've done a couple of rear ends before. This is actually going to be my very first 12-bolt posi that I've rebuilt. I've worked on 12 bolts before. I've pulled out and changed gears and all that, but as far as rebuilding the clutch pack, this is gonna be the first one. Last posi rear end I did was an 8.8 out of a Ford Explorer that I have in a S10 that I drag race. So anyways, just figured I'd throw that out there. This is just my experience from years of working on stuff. So first thing I'm gonna do here, well, I should mention also what I did was when I pulled this out, and I had said earlier about leaving the retaining caps that hold these two bearing surfaces into the housing, I bolted those back in the housing so they didn't get kicked over or lost or mixed up. And what I did was this outer race that goes over this bearing, I put that back in there too, just so those wouldn't get mixed up. Because in looking at these bearings, and again, this falls on just experience and not you know, an education, as I guess you would say. Not that experience is an education, but these bearings look good. And I think I'm just gonna rerun these carrier bearings. There's no sense in pulling them off and putting new ones on if I don't need to. They seem good to me. I have multiple cars, I guess. So, you know, it's just like when you got a bunch of kids, you know, sometimes you gotta hand me down shoes or sometimes you gotta cut the corners a little bit, but these seem good, and I don't really see a reason that I'm going to change them. I will, however, change the bearings on the pinion, because that has to be really changed, because by the time you try to pull one of these bearings off and get it off, you know, it's cheap money to just put a new one on there because you can ding it up pulling it off. But like I said, I'm probably going to leave these. So we're going to start first. I'm going to pull off these bolts here, which will remove the ring. So I'm going to grab a 9/16 socket real quick, and we'll use the impact and pop these off. All right, so a little bit of finagling, some very light prying because you don't want to damage anything. And I got the ring gear off of the carrier, so differential carrier. So what I'm going to do now is the spring pack right in here, I'm going to remove. And it's just going to be, again, some gentle prying. And it's under pressure because there's springs on there. Like, you know, I don't think it's 200 pounds, you know, of pressure, but I think it's enough that those springs are going to go flying. And the way things happen for me, it'll probably go flying into my eyeball or something like that. So I'm going to be very careful in removing these. In fact, a little idea I had here was to slip a zip tie through them as they come out. Even though I'm not going to reuse this, like I said, I safety first here, because I will stick one of these in my eye, guaranteed. And we'll go ahead and pry this out. There's 4 springs, so there's 2 coming up on the other end, so we'll see how that works out, if I'm able to get those without them flying. And it looks like I can. I will put one in here as it's coming up. Come on. And the other one may be the one that flies into my eye, so let's see. Let's see. Or into my hand. Nope, got it. Alrighty, I'm just gonna go ahead and put a zip tie in there anyways, because I already did it to 3 other ones, so might as well do it to the other one too. So there we go. Now that we get into here, now we have the spider gears, and these are the side gears, the larger ones. The ones over here on the end that actually have that shaft going through, those are called the spider gears. So what we need to do now is get all this apart, and what you usually do is you roll it out. But this being a posi, it's got a little bit of pressure on it. So I'm gonna have to figure that out. Again, I'm just kind of probing around with these. I'm not really putting pressure on it because these gears are actually kind of expensive. I looked at replacing these gears on Rock Auto, whatever, Summit Racing, and they were kind of a little bit pricey. And by the time I'd get the whole rear end done, I could have just bought a whole nother carrier, you know, that was already set up. And like I said, when you got a bunch of, well, not a bunch, but when you got a couple of cars, sometimes you have to spread yourself out a little bit, and kind of this is what hot rodding is all about, you know, running with what you got. Don't just run to the catalog and buy whatever, you know, you can't afford or can't afford, whatever. Just kind of work at it and figure it out. That's worked for me for many years. So what I'm doing here is I'm just playing with these side gears a little bit and getting them to move, you know, with my fingers. They're not moving very fast like an open carrier would, because there is tension on these. But as you see, I got that one out. The other one's way back in here, and I need to work it out as well. So I'll keep working on that. But maybe what we should do here, because I can just cut to that, and you don't need to watch all that stuff. But you can see there's a bushing, kind of like a bearing of sorts, that goes on the back side of this, in between the housing itself and the spider gears. Now, what you always want to do when you take stuff apart is you want to take your time. You don't want to damage things, and you want to inspect things as they come apart, because you never know what kind of condition something's in until you see the insides of it. So you wipe it off a little bit. It's got some weird coloring in there, but it just seems like a normal wear kind of thing. I don't see any real, well, there's a crack right there that runs through there. So when I get it all cleaned up, I'll run through there and see what it's like, see if I need to replace these back pieces. I don't know if you can replace them without replacing the gears. That we will figure out. So anyways, I'll go ahead and get this apart and get it all cleaned up. But I just wanted to take a moment and say, you know, this is my first venture, or a brand new venture with doing videos for YouTube. I figured, you know, I spend a lot of time just kind of hanging out in my shop alone, working on stuff, you know, and I figured, well, you know what, I've been doing this long enough that maybe I could share a little bit of my experience, and maybe you learn something, maybe you don't, maybe I'm entertaining, I don't know, but I appreciate you taking the time to watch this. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you'll enjoy more to come. I'm looking forward to seeing that. But this is going to be a channel, so I'm going to need you to hit the subscribe button if you would, please, and like it, and leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about my videos. Do I take too long talking about them? Do I take not enough? Am I not informative? Whatever, any constructive criticism, I would love to hear from you. And I'll read all the comments, and I'll do whatever I can to make content that people will enjoy. So yeah, you know, I'm just a regular old guy just hanging out in my shop doing the regular old things that I always do. And like I said, if you want to spend some time watching me do that, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much.